rocking back on my heel. She's a wild bird that wanders, too easy to stay. I knew she'd have to lose me to find her own way. Oh, Corey, I'll be coming soon from the Louisiana pine to the Mississippi blue. From the Louisiana pine to the Mississippi blue. The ocean, a whirlwind
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, The Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, The Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And Jake Feinberg Show just returned from the Bay Area, going to San Jose and Oakland, chronicling the people's history of music, which is what it is and always has been. And it's an honor to be back in the seat here and connecting with a soul child who was creating on the bandstand long before I was ever birthed. And she came from a very organic scene, a scene that was stimulated at a time when music and the creative arts was seen as a profession in this country. It was not seen as the musician's gift to the world. And she was at the forefront of the creative music process, which in many ways, the Jake Feinberg Show is what it's all about. My show has become about rhythm, and rhythm is love, and also about the creative process in all arts in order to expand musical vocabulary on the bandstand. She is a woman who is constantly growing and learning about herself. It took her a while to find her own voice, and she counsels and teaches a lot of cats who are in that situation now, and I think a much different dynamic in our paradigm as it relates to how music is seen and significance in our culture. She's played with all the heaviest cats, and she herself is one of the heaviest cats. Liz Stiers, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you, Jake. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor. You know, I just wanted to ask you, did you ever get to go to Bolinas?
Oh, yes.
Good.
I mean, I grew up in Mill Valley.
I know, and the reason I ask you, I don't know if you know the bass player Steve Swallow. He was more known as a jazz bass player, and but he moved to Marin County. He moved to Bolinas, and he was talking about all these incredible poets, all these amazing people that were just in that region. And I wanted you just to talk a little bit about some of the beat poets that you and your siblings or your folks were really influenced by. Those cats have been in my heart since this journey began. And they laid the groundwork for all what went on in the 60s. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that and who you guys were close to.
Well, it's funny. I'm not sure, I think you probably knew that Huey Lewis's mom, Magda, was partners with Lou Welch for a time, so I met him as a kid.
Let me just, I want to, before you keep going, so I'm doing a documentary on Stan Getz, and I'm producing a documentary, and I interviewed Huey, and this is what he said, and I wish I had the audio. Lou Welch was quite instrumental for me. I was away at prep school a lot. He was a William Carlos Williams debutante. He believed in the language of the street and spoken word. So yeah, we vetted that, but I'm sorry to break you up. You keep riffing on that. Keep going with that, with where you were headed.
So Huey's mom took me to the Fillmore when I was 10 years old with Huey's little brother. Huey was away at prep school, but his little brother was, we were in 5th grade together, and he was my first boyfriend. And so his mother took us into the Fillmore to see a whole slew of poets. Lou was among them. I don't know if Ginsberg. I don't know who all was there. I was too young to even know. I remember sitting and I remember the poster and sort of these words coming at me. But I was still a child in the 60s because I'm not. I was 10 years old in 1965. So I met Lou and I was around some of those people. My parents were studying Gurdjieff, and there were different demonstrations, I know I've seen Ginsberg speak. I know I've seen that, but I didn't have really, relationships with any of those people.
Can you talk about
brought up in the truth.
No, absolutely. I mean, I realized you were a child, but you were exposed.
Yeah.
You were exposed to all the Gurdjieff, the Fourth Way. Can you talk about just from, even though maybe you didn't totally grasp what was happening from a cosmic sense, how you were impacted as a young girl with that. I mean, to me, that you were so blessed to be able to be like that in that situation.
Well, it's funny because it all came back around in the studies that I got into 10 years ago, which Gurdjieff was really one of the beginning threads of the diamond approach. So there's another whole that sort of uses the fourth way teachings to really explore consciousness and presence. But my parents, they were going on weekend retreats with some of the community of people following Ouspensky and Gurdjieff here, and then they got interested in Jung, so they moved to Zurich and they studied Jung for 7 years. So I grew up into the milieu of their search for consciousness and their sort of understanding of the larger context of human connectivity and non-dual reality. That's what they were emerging. So, I wasn't reading Gurdjieff when I was 13, but I definitely experienced a lot of Jung. And I lived in Zurich, and I went to the Institute and heard a lot of people speak. And Marie-Louise von Franz, I was at her birthday party, and things that were really sort of shaping of my consciousness coming from that time.
Can you talk about how your consciousness? I think that it's so interesting now. We live at a time where it's so formulaic. Everything is so data driven. Yeah. In music, there's a huge formula trip, but we're sort of creating droids now in some ways. And I have 2 young daughters, and I am on this sort of sacred journey to make sure that they understand that they don't have to play by the rules that society says you have to adhere by. You can actually live by your own rules, and it's a lot more fun. And I kind of wanted you to talk about a spiritual experience that you had early on that shaped your consciousness and how that played out. Because obviously, I mean, your folks were deeply embedded in this incredible. I mean, it's just so intoxicating for me. I could just spend hours dealing with these guys. And it's frustrating. I can't bring up the quote right now, but there was just in Bolinas specifically, because what happened was Swallow was playing with the dude was playing with Stan Getz, and he was playing with, in the 60s, he was in New York just playing, burning jazz. And then he moved to Bolinas, and then next thing you know, he's recording with Banana and Joe Bauer, down the coast, and they put out this amazing album. And it's just like the Youngbloods rhythm section with Steve Swallow. I said something really funky and weird was going on. I mean, people were waving their freak flags very freely at that time. So could you talk about sort of a cosmic experience you had as a girl on your own that expanded your view of the world?
Wow. God,
this is only set 1. So if we need to circle back and set 2, I'm just saying, I mean, it doesn't have to be a psychedelic thing. It can just be something that touched your heart. It touched your heart. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think the connectivity of all things was visible. I mean, I grew up, I was a child in the 60s, but, I took LSD at the age of 13. I saw things that I wasn't quite ready to assimilate, but as I kind of moved out into the world and into these amazing experiences, I was just around astounding people. So I think the fact that that there was a reality beyond the one that was being given to us in school and by the previous generation was always true for me. And when I when I kind of expanded into understanding Jung and synchronicity and the collective unconscious, so I was already kind of connected up by the time I was 15, 16 years old to knowing that it was a living, dynamic conversation between me and reality. And that there was something to know inside myself that was really precious and important. So that's, I think a lot of people are just scheduled to believe that all the knowledge is out there and everything they need is out there. And I got introduced to what was inside myself really at an early age. So that was very helpful. So my creativity was born right out of that, if that makes sense to you.
Well, you are just, on fire right now. What was inside you that you discovered?
Well, so I started writing songs, and I had my parents, both of them. My dad was a jazz cat in San Francisco in the 50s.
Get out of here! Wait, he was playing gig, and this is unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
What was his? What was he play? What kind of instrument was he? He was. Wait, what kind of instrument?
Do you know about my father? You don't know about my father.
Well,
Okay.
apparently, I'm just saying. What instrument did he play? I mean, this is because I have been doing.
He was a jazz. So his name was Ernie Stiers, but he left in 1960. So he may not have met those guys. Although he knew Cal Jader. He told me about helping Cal Jader set up his first electric piano. He was a jazz pianist who, yeah.
Well, Cal is. I've
end,
interviewed. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So, was he a piano player?
Yeah, keep going.
Was he a piano player?
Oh yeah. And,
Ernie Stiers
Ernie Stiers.
This is unbelievable. Continue, please. So he was a jazz cat marinating in the San Francisco area, and because he was a white cat, he could he could hang in the like I'm sure he was down in the Fillmore district too, in the Mission district when it was all black too.
I'm sure he was, but it wasn't a long period of time because he was, he was the true thing. He was the true form, and he needed to go study composition and go much further with the music. But he had this wife and 3 kids and a day job at CBS. So he ended up leaving us and left me and my siblings and my mother. Okay, and then the story goes on. If you look into it, you'll see that he went back. He studied classical composition with a really famous guy in Boston, whose name I'll think of in a minute. And he became Trey Anastasio's mentor when Trey was 18. And
yeah, I mean that to me was a little bit. I'm looking here about that. I mean, and Mazel Tov. I don't love fish, but I do credit Trey for. I really credit him for. I mean, I don't know if you knew this story, but he got busted with a huge amount of heroin and was going to be looking at, any normal person would have gone to jail for the rest of their life. And it was up in Saratoga Springs. And then at that point, this is well after he was a rock star, but he basically, he's totally stone sober now, still playing his ass off. So I really respect him for that. But your dad basically said
he was a jazz. Go ahead.
Well, no, it's what's cool is that. I mean, was he definitely? I mean, if he procreated, if he helped birth 3 kids, partly create 3 kids, had a steady gig. I don't think he was dodging responsibility, but he was really on his own path. And did you guys respect that, or was that a really difficult thing not having your dad around?
Well, there's a lot to be said about that. I totally respect it now because I am kept from the same cloth, and I know, he went on to compose in the classical, he composed classical compositions. I mean, really like ballets and symphonies using his jazz roots and the whole modern atonal understanding of music from the 60s. So he did a really interesting and unique thing, and he is his own, he's his own expression in the world. So I really admire him, and he left me with some very powerful genes. But he did not stick around and raise us, and it wasn't so easy. Just, those were hard times, and that's who he was. That's who he was. So what he had amazing stories about playing jazz in San Francisco in that time before he left, and that's sort of a little exposure that I got mostly through his stories because I was still too young.
Well, this is just blowing my mind. Right, Ernie Stiers. I got to look this cat. So, I mean, was he doing because you couldn't have really come about in the classical composers that were coming out of, what was it? What was the college in with Luciano Berio was there, and I can't remember the name of the school at the time, but there were so many avant-garde classical composers. Was he doing avant-garde music?
Well, I think you would consider that. He studied with a guy named, I think his name was Slominski in Boston.
Wow.
And then
we got to get that name immediately. We got to get that name.
Well, it's on his. You can look it up on Wikipedia, and there's stuff about him online. But he then had this. Go ahead.
No, it was Mills College. That's what I was thinking of. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, he wasn't. So he left. Really, he left in 1960. He was gone, and he didn't study here. He went back to Boston. His family was from the East Coast, so he lived out the rest of his life in the East Coast. He didn't come back this way. But I saw him. I mean, I saw him starting at about age 10 or 11. I went back and visited him, and I went to the composers conferences that he had national composers conferences where all the classical composers would submit their work, and then they would select it, and they would have 2 weeks at Bennington College where they'd all play their music. It was very avant-garde. It was following the classical, which is a very strict classical style of composition, but using all kinds of really innovative ideas. So that was what he was doing before he got into teaching Trey. Trey was much later thing.
No, I mean, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page. This is blowing my mind. So you had three. Sarah, Ernie, and yourself were his, and then he moved to Vermont in '67 to work as an administrator for the Vermont Symphony Orchestra. Just off the record, Liz, do you have any recordings of the work that he did at that time?
Oh yeah.
I would love to hear some of this stuff. Like live performance, not his jazz stuff. I'm talking about because I'm so done with the and I don't mean to bag on classical music, but it's such a formula trip. And these cats like your dad and Harry Parch, who I'm sure he knew I don't know if you knew Harry, Lou Harrison, and these guys were they were stretching out classical music with percussion, jazz inflection. Oh, yeah. It was so, I mean, I was born in '78, so I just, I missed the boat to a degree, but I look at those guys and I'm so proud to know that your dad was a pioneer of that as well. Did he? Oh. Was he?
He's got a CD out there. You should listen to his CD. It's phenomenal. It's truly, I think you'll really appreciate what it is.
I would anything that he has, but I mean, I guess you were hip enough to be out there. What did you take away from it? How did you grow as a musician, as a composer, by going out and marinating in that stuff when he was in Boston?
Well, my mom remarried a guy who had a music school in San Rafael, who actually gave lessons to some of these guys. Like John Cipollino was one of his students when John was a kid.
Mario is like one of my Mario. I'm going to be out sitting on the roof of his house in May, and I'm coming to see you because.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we're going to do a Facebook Live interview because I mean Mario. John was a student of Glenn Carlson was his cat's name, Creative Music School.
Glenn Carlson, very early on. And Mario's mother was my brother and sister's piano teacher, so we used to go over there. Yeah, and I sang in high school chorus with Mario and Sean Hopper too, who ended up being.
Wait, hold on, because Mario's mom was a badass piano player. She was playing like duets with Nicky Hopkins. Yeah. So you didn't take piano lessons, but your brothers and sisters did.
No, well, it was my brothers and sisters. I took piano lessons from another interesting person's mother who was in a band called Clover. But anyway, I was really young when we were taking them over to lessons, but I grew up around all those families. We were all in the same town. So Mario knows who I am. I mean, he definitely, we've crossed paths for sure.
Well, because that's the other part of it. I mean, at the time, could you just talk about when you were like the calling that you had to get stuff out of your system as a performer, and also more importantly, the idea of that it was something that you could actually make a livelihood with. I think that's the biggest issue that up with younger cats today is just this idea that you can pay to play or you can play for the door. but there's not gigs.
Yeah.
You know, there's not the meaning that
Right.
meaning that a musician is not seen as a profession. And I just wanted you to riff on the idea of you saying.
Well, I can rip on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can rip on that. I have a lot to say about that.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I grew up at a time where the music business was still, you know, functioning, you know, and for me, I mean, I grew up, I had the genetics and I had the kind of heart. I mean, musicians have a quality of heart and soul and a depth of understanding. Most of them, that's what they're trying to express. You know, that's what we're here doing on earth. If that's the path you're on, that's how you're, you know, that's the cloth you're cut from. And to have to show up in the world and be that is not an easy thing, because no, there's not a lot of support for it. But I was writing songs since I was like a preteen, and I was meeting musicians. You know, I just had, you know, like I don't know if you know about Moby Grape. I'm sure you've heard of them. I ran into people and in different places as a really young person who were songwriters. Like literally, I ran into, you know, Skip Spence and Bob Mosley at, you know, the waterfront in Sausalito at an old ferry boat, and they were working on writing the song. I mean, I was just, you know, that's what was happening around me. My brothers, my older siblings were writing songs and having bands. Huey's little brother, Jeff, was the drummer in my brother's band. So, you know, it was everywhere, and it was always who I was. And I had some painful stuff as a kid. I had stuff to say. I had feelings to digest. So, you know, that's how we do it. We make music.
This was the band, the Cascades.
The Cascades.
I
Yeah.
love this. This is
But
so. What were you? Do you have? What were you singing about at that time? I mean, because I mean, it wasn't like you guys were not busking on the streets. You weren't, as far as I know, you weren't homeless. You had a roof over your head. You were eating. I mean, it was.
We had. Yeah, no, I mean, Cascade Drive in Mill Valley is just incredibly beautiful. People think they're in Muir Woods, but it's a beautiful canyon where my dad, before he left, bought a big carriage house. So we had a home, and we were in absolute beauty. We didn't have a lot of, you know, support, but we had interesting people who were parents that, you know, spoke to us as people. That's probably valuable. But my brother and sister and I, we were living in the house, renting it from my mom, who was living in Zurich studying young. So that's what we were doing.
Wow. Wow.
And we were playing. There was a production company in Marin County called Marin County Homegrown Productions. And these were guys we all went to high school together. And they were producing shows with Huey and all sorts of local musicians. I was singing with a lot of those shows, and you know, we'd have Terry Haggerty, and we'd have some of the Doobie Brothers, because John McPhee ended up joining the Doobie Brothers, and I was on stage with, you know, Ricky Lee Jones one day, and so I was doing that. The Cascades would open for bands, and then there was Wet Nurse, so I was playing with them some of the time. So there's just, you know, it was a really fluid scene. At home, you know, I was writing songs, and, you know, I was writing songs about, you know, love and life, and you know, what the hell are we doing down here on earth? You know? And I had a vision of having a life as a musician. I just didn't know what it was going to look like. And I think in a certain way, I was never, I didn't have the kind of ambition. You know, Huey had this very clear ambition. I knew him as a younger man, you know, and I didn't really have that. I was kind of a child that was floating along in you know, the river, the Dow, being carried hither and thither.
It's so beautiful, because that's, you know, it's really amazing. I mean, my name is very Jewish, but I was never. My mom was Catholic, my dad was Jewish, and about 5 years ago, my wife is Taiwanese, and I received the Tao, and it fundamentally changed who the words don't even describe it. Everything, all my hang-ups fell away, and I just I've been seeking my true nature on the radio, and just trying to break my habitual nature. So the Tao is deep within me. Yeah.
Do you know about the Diamond Approach work? About Hamid Ali? Is that
no? I mean, this is stuff that I want. This is why I want to talk to you, because I want you to not just.
I want to have a conversation.
Yeah, no. I mean, like I said, I feel like we need to do about 5 or 6 interviews. I mean, this is like a very deep spiritual thing, and I'm not. I'm not, because what I do is I take these interviews and I transcribe them all too. So I mean, a lot of this stuff is meant for inspiration and enlightenment. I mean, none of it is. So yeah, I mean, to me, I'm just sort of living. It's interesting because I think like you said you used the word floating, but I would actually say that you were, instead of, in the academy reading about it, you were obviously reading books, but you were living it. You were living it.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's like, I don't do a voracious amount of reading. I've done 2,000 primary source interviews with everybody from Huey Lewis to Bill Cosby to Ted Nugent to Ahmad Jamal. So, I mean, I'm all over the map. And I'm focused on the motherland, and I mean Terry Haggerty. By the way, before we go, I need his number again because I love that man. So I miss him, and I don't have his number, and I need to call him immediately. These people were full of love, and it was the most incredible. I mean, and and when I look at society today, I say there's very few people that'll tell you the truth anymore. Except you guys.
I know.
You guys will tell you. You guys will tell the truth. And so that's the thing, is that what I love about where you're at now, as far as I can tell, is that you're done with the macro sort of, like the big picture. Obviously, there's a lot of insane things going on, but it's about how can Liz Stiers affect change in her world? How can she affect change in her world? And that's what Jake Feinberg's been doing on my show. No,
I hear that. I like that about your show. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the other, I'm going to go back for a minute here. I've done 2 interviews with Cipollini, Mario. He said that at 13, this is what was so incredible, is that in 66, that was really the summer of love. People think it was 67. It was really 66, okay?
Yeah.
It was before the invasion. The pranksters were in full effect, and I just visited with 2 of the original ones, Ken Babbs and Walker. I went up to Eugene and did Facebook Live with them. And Mario was walking around with a bottle of liquid acid at 13. And he was, and then he would go to these, he said after a while, he'd go to these classical sessions, these rehearsals, and the conductor's baton started to look like a fan blade. So like, it was like, and this was government produced Sandoz acid. That's the other part of it, is that not only were you being inundated with like the most beautiful people who were talking about, I don't know, you articulated it so well at the beginning of this, about this connection between the unconscious and the conscious, the metaphysical state, but you were also, I mean, can you talk about that original psychedelic experience you had at 13?
Yeah, and Terry Haggerty happens to be involved, actually, as it turns out.
Of course he was, man. Yeah, of course he was, man.
I think there were a lot of people, and so the LSD did come in, and there were people I met even before I had the acid trip that I was going to reference. Oh my God, 1966, I was going to the show, I was going to the Fillmore, I was going to the Avalon. I saw, Bill Graham's Sunday afternoon shows where he would, audition the band. I watched the Doors at their audition on Sunday afternoon for 25 cents.
Wow. Wait, so I didn't know that they had an audition kind of gig on a Sunday afternoon. So cool.
Yeah. Sunday afternoons were audition day, and you could go during the day. And so, Magda Craig was one of the main, people parents who would drive us over. But I took acid and I went to see Sons of Champlin at Fairfax Pavilion.
Oh, that is fantastic. That is just fantastic. That band was it took me a minute to get
I'm glad you know about them.
Well, no, I've interviewed everybody in the band. I mean, but I mean, everyone that was still left. I have to send you all these interviews because you're going to love them. Champlin, the Vibes, Palmer. I've done 2 interviews. Haggerty was one of the biggest influences, but it took me a minute to get my ear around some of the studio stuff. But now it's like they were the most ferocious band out of all of those bands, and there were so many great. And I live and die with the Dead, and I love Quicksilver, and but I mean the Sons. Forget it. So anyway,
I know.
you took some
I know.
you took
So I was a big fan. I was a big fan already because my brother was dating Bill Bowen's girlfriend, so had been exposed to them early on, and they were playing around and playing at high school. But that album with 1982A had just come out, and I took some acid with a friend her mother was another real acid queenie kind of, one of the real bohemian types that was around, so we could pretty much go anywhere. In Fairfax, I live like 3 blocks from where this happened right now. And I lost my friends, and I was in a field waiting for the show to start, and I came on this acid, and I was, I was a pretty cautious kid because I had a lot of opportunities to die. So I took care of myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't expect to get as high as I got, and I got frightened, and I was outside, and I was lost. I didn't really know the people, and I ended up getting into the middle of the crowd, and the Suns came out, and they started playing that song, 1982A, Can You Feel It Coming? And it just blew my mind what the music did to me. And I just hit a total ecstatic state, and it kind of, those experiences happened to me over enough time that I was aware that there was way more going on in the world than I had been told.
There's two things about, the pranksters. Ken Babbs talks about acid being an ego deflator, and then also George Walker talks about a lot of preconceived notions that you have before eating LSD go away. I mean, were there things?
Yeah.
Now, did you play? Were you dancing on the edge of existence when you say you had many opportunities to die? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, yeah. I mean, we were hitchhiking around. We were kids hitchhiking around. I mean, we didn't. Our parents, especially the generation. I was born in '55, so I was still a kid in the '60s. And the older siblings had kind of wreaked havoc. The parents didn't know what to do anymore. And so we were all flying under the radar, doing pretty much the same stuff that our siblings who were 5 years older than us were doing, but we were really, we were unguided. I wouldn't say misguided. We were guided. The angels took care of us. But, to some extent, I had to be more cautious and more responsible. I thought I was a grown-up, honestly. But, when I look back on it, my sister had a very unfortunate thing happen in a hitchhiking event. And I know that I was, having to watch out and was often in harm's way without knowing it all the time. And sometimes I'm amazed that I lived through those years because it was crazy out here. It was kind of crazy.
That's all. I mean, I know it was insane, and I want to get back. I need to get back into and to really, did you stop and smell the roses at that time? Or I guess the better question is, following your experience on psychedelics, how did it change you? Did it embolden you to get on the bandstand? Did it make you connect with your metaphysical, other dimensions?
Yeah.
You read about these things,
I think that did, but I wasn't a person that took a ton of LSD. Like, I was a pretty level. More, I would say what happened is by the time I was 16, I got about Lao Tzu. I'm sure you do.
Oh, well,
and the Tao. I got exposed to that. Yeah, those teaching I got exposed to when I was 16. So I was.
Can you please just? I just could sit here. I would love you to tell me how that story of how you got. Did you have actual? Because my teachers are from Taiwan.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just curious how you got exposed to Lao Tzu.
Because my stepfather and my mother were seekers, and my stepfather was just a real. He was he was a spiritual guy. He was a guy who had something magical inside him, and he read me Lao Tzu. He talked about the nature of life. When I was hurting and confused, I would have these dialogues in which he would, introduce these concepts to me, and they went right into my blood, So I wasn't blowing my mind on acid all those years. I was more or less trying to grow up and learn about that stuff And all the while, I was playing and singing and writing songs. I was always playing and singing since I was like 9 years old. Because he was this guitar teacher, and there were guitars all over the house. So I just, and I was very self-taught. I had a lot of capacity to learn and figure out stuff by ear. So they were kind of hand in hand, the spiritual seeking and the musical creative. And if you understand about the Tao, and you understand that sort of vision of life, you know how to become a portal for that magic to come through you.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I'm not a musician, so the music doesn't come from the heavens through me, but it does in these interviews, in that I'm able to, like we're doing right now, you get off the phone and say, wow, we went everywhere today. Like we go on these long trips, and I do it with everybody, and I don't think I've had a clunker interview in years, and it's because of the Tao.
It's because of you. I read enough about you. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm okay with this.
Well, no,
literally,
I've been looking for you for a long time, and I didn't really actually know how steeped you were in the Tao and how, but it's just these. I think that is something that Hags. I transcribed one of our interviews, and he talked about the fact that the bands, the seminal bands, the ones that the parents didn't know what to do with the kids, the seminal bands really understood the craft, the musicianship, and the ability to take the audience on that trip with them, not because of the acid, but because they went to alternative music schools, all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And can you talk about the impact that those schools had on your generation? Just in what were they about? I've done interviews with cats from, like David Morgan went to Berkeley High, but they had all these offshoot alternative schools where you could go, and like I've interviewed Jerry Pompili, and I've interviewed Bob Barsotti. Those guys came directly out of these schools that were like, hey, you could do stage, you can be backstage, you can be front stage, you can, it was like, wait, what? This is America at one time? It's like, this was like, so can you talk about what those creative schools and how they lent themselves to individuality in music?
I would have to say that I think I know about how the colleges morphed in order to meet the growing need and interest.
Yeah, there are no right or wrong answers. So you riff wherever the question takes you, like the Tao, just go.
So I would just say that having no parents in the area, mostly from the time I was 16 or 17, I didn't have parents around who were, trying to get me into college. I went to College of Marin, and they had an amazing music department, but I was just learning theory and singing in the chorus and learning piano and this and that. I didn't go into the university situation, so I did not. I ended up much later going in. I went back to school and had a whole other career when I, realized that I wanted to have a few other kinds of experiences in life and have a child and things. So I know all about that, but I didn't go into those schools. When I don't know what Berkeley was doing in 1968 and 69 or even 73 to 75. I was already performing and playing in 75, and I had only really done junior college in music department work at that point. So I can't speak to that question.
Well, no, I'd like you to speak to the fact that when your first real professional gigs, and Charlie Parker told Tootie Heath, Albert Tootie, one of the Heath brothers, he once asked Charlie Parker, he said, what do you listen to? And Bird said, I listen to the radio. I listen to everything on the radio, and I listen to it, and I work it out, and then I figure out what key it's in, and then I learn to play that tune in every key. And I also listen to everything, meaning he was crossing genres, and he was learning to play in every key. So how did you, when you picked up those guitars, how did you learn to play every tune in every key?
I just, it's a genetic, it's a lucky gene pool in a certain way. I still have people go, "How do you do that?" And I can't even really tell them.
I love it. Okay, so it's a spiritual, it's divine.
I didn't know. I didn't know, but I didn't know. No, I mean, I think my father, and I passed it on to my son, and now that I'm a teacher, I can see, he doesn't have to think about this. It comes so naturally into his being. He can sit down and he'll hear it in his head, and his fingers will find it on the keyboard. I could say I have regrets that I wasn't given enough support to get really good instruction and get exposed to teachers and, kind of have that education that you have to pay for. But I wouldn't give up a thing about how my life has gone. So I'm not really regretful, but I do it very instinctively. And so, I mean, I have enough theory to teach it to people in the traditional ways, but the way it shows up for me is really kind of a little magical, I would say.
I love it. So your mom was sending money back to you guys, and that's how you. I mean, how did you live? I mean, this is the most vexing. Go ahead.
We were paying her rent. We were supporting her.
Unbelievable. Wait, like Wet Nurse and the Cascades and that, the Monday Night Live band.
Well, no, not that. I mean, me and my sister. My brother was literally just pretty much in and out, sleeping on the floor. Me and my sister rented the house with some other people from my mother. I was working. I mean, I was working young, in restaurants and cleaning houses and doing whatever I could to pay rent and playing music, like lots of people at that time. We weren't getting that kind of support. We didn't get that kind of support over those years. This wasn't what was happening. So we lived in this incredible house, and there were musicians everywhere. I don't know if you remember about Sock with Camel was, that was another San Francisco band.
Oh man, that was a bad. Yeah, okay, go ahead. I know that band.
You know about that. So William Severs, Willie Truckaway was in the house next door to my parents, and we had one of my roommates was a guy that had been manager for Santana for years. So it's just people crawling all over the place everywhere who were ensconced in the music business. So I was just in the middle of all that. That's kind of where I learned everything, just from everything I was around.
Is there, talking to Liz Stiers here on the Jake Feinberg Show, just having a ball. I'm just curious about the first time that that you went on the bandstand by yourself to perform, and what that experience was like.
Well, it's funny about that. I think I don't know if you've ever been up to the amphitheater on the top of Mount Tam.
I can't. I'm gonna be
festival.
like I haven't, but I'll be there. Like camping out for weeks in May, so I'm going to go everywhere.
Really?
I'm not.
I'm going to take you up.
No, you're going to take me everywhere because this is where, I mean, Mario and I have been talking. He wants to tell the whole story of his. I mean, we've already done it. He wants to write a book, and Mario is also has like many of us, fighting his own madness as we all are, and but he. He's like, he's like, for some reason, it's in May. I want to do the interviews with you on the top of my parents' house in Mill Valley. So I'm coming at because listen, Mario was like, Mario's the type of cat. He's like, who is this dude? What is he? Because these are not, and I opened him up, and we've done so much cosmic work, and I just, so I feel very connected, on a very deep, I mean, I found my, but anyway, so I didn't want to cut you off.
Wow.
You played a gig up on the top of Mount Tam?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I have a picture of me at the age of 11 right in front of the stage, and there's like David Freiberg from the Jefferson Airplane
of course.
Is on stage.
And the Ace of Cups.
On stage. And I think it's even Jack Cassidy standing right in front, and then I'm sitting there, a little 11-year-old, and it's just hysterical. That's the first place I ever performed, was at that amphitheater on Mount Tam with my sister. We did some songs that we wrote. In fact, one of them's on my record. We wrote that song Motto Day, and I have a picture of us singing it. So it was 1972 or 3.
Oh my
and
gosh. You were 11. I mean, no, you were 17 at that time.
I was 8. I was 17, 18 when we did that gig. I'm not sure exactly when it was in there, but yeah, a lot of shows happened on that mountain. There was a show in '67 called the Magic Mountain, and there's just now starting to come out with a lot of pictures and video footage where every band played. And it was the kind of one and only time they opened up the mountain to make it that kind of a venue, and they decided not to do it again. I think they have done it since.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's much more. It is so
hard to control.
It is so corporate now. This is something I want you to talk about. Because like when I interviewed Dan Healy, I've done 3 interviews with Dan, and he was talking about like when the Dead first started, they basically, or even early like antiquated PA systems. I mean, that's basically what was being. That's what your sound system was. You didn't have these huge systems that, I watched your YouTube clips and they're beautiful, these acoustic sets, and the output is great, But at a certain period of time when you started, it was like maybe the PA, a raspy PA. And I just wonder how your ears grew on the bandstand, and how you developed your voice when we were not plugged in. I mean, it sounds to me like you were right there on the edge of, playing acoustic music, plugging in obviously, but ultimately how you learned to listen on the bandstand and how you found your voice in a unamplified setting.
Well, my experience is a little, let's see, how does it start? So from the age of 18 till I was about 28, I went from, playing acoustic music to having a band and performing, and then, things, especially when Wet Nurse, I know you know about Wet Nurse because I think you called my brother a couple of years ago.
I was like, I need to speak to Liz. He was telling me about Wet Nurse, and I cannot find any clips on YouTube, but maybe there are. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
and that was the first punk band. I mean, there's the first. I mean, that's what they call punk. I mean, it was the first of its kind.
They were really very cutting edge, and Huey produced. They were 45, and they were punk and performance, and I was pretty much a stand-in just because I could play any instrument. If anybody was out of town, I was either playing bass or I was playing guitar or I was playing keyboard. So I was an honorary Wet Nurse. So to speak. It was back in that, Jake, we could talk about this. There's a whole, I'm writing my own book called No Girls in the Band.
I love
it. It's the beginning of the No Girls in the Band stage where, I was there doing stuff, but finding my voice was really hard because I was largely unrecognized because it was a boys' club for the most part. It just was. So that there was, there was the lead singer bands that had a female lead singer. There are a few of them, but there were a lot of bands where, you were kind of on the side. So I honestly didn't even know what my own gift was till I was much older. I didn't understand what I had inside of me. So that's just how life is. You find things out when you find them out.
I interviewed. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
No, I interviewed Cindy Blackman, who was up in Vegas, and I had a chance. She's Carlos Santana's drummer and his wife now, and I know her. And she said we were hanging and talking and doing an interview, and she was like, Art Blakey raised her the Elvin and those amazing jazz drummers took care of her. I could only imagine as a female being a burning drummer, and the flack and the bullying. I mean, were there cats that tried to bully you off the stage because you were a woman?
No, they were happy to have a cute backup singer, but they weren't. I couldn't. I have to tell you a story about Jerry Garcia that just fits right in.
Go ahead, yeah.
God bless Jerry Garcia.
God bless Jerry Garcia.
He was the kind,
Yeah, go ahead.
He was the true, I can't tell you, because I met a lot of people and I played a lot of music with people, but Jerry, when he put the band back together again, and I ended up being in there, he said one day in a rehearsal, if you have any original songs that you want to bring in, let me know.
That is so beautiful, because my favorite year of Jerry Garcia's listening to Liz Stiers sing is 82. Is that pocket of time right there. Part of it's that Billy was playing drums, but did you act? That is so classic Garcia that he'd say, "Yo, Liz,
so
wait, hold on, wait. When he put the band back together, are you saying that you had a first trip with Jerry before 82?
No, he had been. No, but he had the band. He'd done the Cats Under the Stars, and he'd had Maria and Donna
Absolutely,
Godchild sing.
absolutely.
And then it came, then that band would come apart and come together. And so then he decided he wanted to do some gigs. He and John were doing some duos. I had met John, and I had done some recording with John, because John was the first cat I ever knew who had it in home. Of course, it would be John. Had a little, set up a little in-home studio. So we were all like, wow, you can get a drum kit, and then you can get this, and then you get the little 4-track, and wow, this is so cool. And I had this song that I'd recently written, and so he, we made a demo of that song in John's spare bedroom.
You see, okay, so I want to be very clear. I'm going to send you some of my earlier shows. Maybe you, I know you don't have hours of time to listen to all of the shows I send you, but it's like the beginning song to my show. It says, I say, on a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, as a trumpet player, Sunship, who was a drummer, Dizzy, and John Kahn. John Kahn has put me. John is in my soul 100%. He was adopted. He was Jewish. He was adopted by Jewish parents. He was Jewish. They brought him out. I love the man so dearly, and we need to get that 40. Yes. We need to get that demo out immediately. I need to hear that demo immediately.
I don't know. I have to find out. So about Jimmy Moore and Jimmy Jacobs. And I'll have to find out if he's got a copy of that demo, because I don't know if he does.
Anyway, to me, it's like this. It's like Jerry looks at you and says, Liz, but Jerry was hip to you. He was hip to you when you were young. He knew you when you were younger.
No. He didn't know me he didn't meet me till I was maybe 22 or 23. Well, here, let me put it this way. I was backstage at the Fillmore. Bobby Weir must have been a teenager, because I knew some adults that knew them, So I had seen him. I'd been at a lot of shows in the park. Muir Beach, they used to play out Muir Beach. I was.
Oh, there was the Muir Beach acid tests. Yeah, it was just thriving out there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. So I was around all of that. I was heavily involved in the Muir Beach and what happened at Muir Beach too.
Well, we're gonna have to hang with that. We're gonna have to get down on that.
Oh, that's just coming out, man. There's a new Facebook group of people just posting the memories of Muir Beach before it was a public beach. It was a private beach owned by people we knew, and we all grew up around this magical scene of music and this stuff that came out of that particular environment.
But I want to get back to this. In the rehearsal, Jerry looks at Liz Stiers and says...
we're in a music. He doesn't look straight at me. It's not like he says it to me directly, but he says it to the group.
Yeah.
And he includes me. And maybe Ezra, I don't know if Ezra was there yet or not. But, the fact that or maybe he actually said it more to me, because I remember feeling like, oh, my God, he's talking to me. And I didn't have at all the wherewithal or confidence to bring forward one of my songs. Just let me be clear. I just didn't have that ground of being. I didn't know that I was good at what I did. Even
after a decade after, more than a decade after starting professionally, I guess you would say maybe 70.
No.
Go ahead.
I started playing out a little bit between when 18 and 20. I didn't really start writing. My sister and I started writing more seriously when I was 20. We started making demos, and we actually pitched a few songs, and we started a band. And then 2 or 3 years later, I met Garcia, and I had sung, by then I had sung a lot of backup, but I didn't have confidence in myself as a writer. I hadn't really developed my voice all that well, because I was sort of belting, the backup parts behind a lousy sound system, which isn't exactly.
You were overcompensating for the.
I thrashed my voice. Yeah. So all those kinds of things were happening, and I didn't have the kind of egoic structure to go, hey, here's my opportunity. I didn't think that way at all. I just didn't think that way. And I was young. I was young. So.
But I just want to be clear because I'm telling you right now, this is part one of like a 10-part series with you. I mean, we have a lot to get through, and
we've been all over the map, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, and that's what all my shows are. I mean, there's no linear component to it. But the demo with John, what was that song called, and how did that even and how did that happen? It was during the Cats Under the Stars years.
It was. No, it was after that, and so when would that have been roughly?
80?
79
yep,
probably. Because
absolutely.
I think that it had been around 79, and the song was called Desire, and I'll look around and see if I can find that recording. I'll look around. I'd have to like go through. Lots gone down since then.
Yeah, it's okay, Liz, because I mean, everybody has. Listen, you were a total child of this universe, and for you to navigate, and as a woman in that time, it is a miracle that with all the jaded stuff that went down, that you have come out on the other side today, doing what you're doing, inspiring cats and being honest. I mean, that's what it's about. That's why I've been searching for you for so long, because even though I didn't know really, I mean, I don't know what I would have thought. What about the wet nurse stuff? Is there any material on that available? I mean, I just want to get this out into the ether.
Yeah.
Is there stuff on YouTube?
Yeah, what's on YouTube? I'll have to check and see. There was some terrible video, and then there's the record. There's the 45 that's been, this is an esoteric bunch of guys that put this together. But Huey did, produce this 45. And so that's been out there I'll look and see. It's got to be out there on YouTube somewhere. But they're a whole story unto themselves, the whole wet nurse thing.
I want to. We've been cooking here for an hour, and I wanted to put in this one piece of music as we wrap up, and then just come back and have you take a listen to it. Okay?
Okay. I just want to say that for the last 10 years, I've been able to be a midwife to so many singers and songwriters, and people even just stepping into music in the beginning and watching them just get their wings. It's been really amazing.
We're not. We are. Listen, I want to tell you something.
The most important thing I've ever done.
No, listen. We're going to spend a whole hour on the diamond, what you mentioned, and then we're going to vet your.
Oh, diamond, of course.
Yeah, and so don't. We're not trying to rush through your career here, okay? This was like an initial maiden voyage, but I just want to put this in for you because, and then find out exactly where you fit in the harmonies here. So let's take a listen here.
Okay.
Dear Prudence, open up your eyes. Dear Prudence, breathe the sun.
Well, I mean, I lived on that. This is from June 24th, 1982, from the Capitol Theater, Jerry Garcia Band. Were you singing? I'm trying to get your voice there. Was that you singing?
So no, in fact, I want to check that out. That's not me. And I think what you've got there,
Yeah.
I've got to check this out, the tour. So 1982, I do have a lot of recordings that I can send you of when.
Listen. There's one from February that I know you're on, and I'm crying. I cry to the Mississippi Moon every time. I need every Liz stuff, but I'm like trying to like find your voice. So
I got sick on the road. I left the tour. That's Julie Stafford nobody ever sang that part that way. And she's making that little excerpt.
I was going to say, okay, so I'm so okay. So there's my little. Thank you for bursting my fantasy, because I was like, dude, Liz is so great. Because I was really digging that, and I'm like, I've never heard anyone sing that like that. So I'm so sorry. So we just played. We did not play.
That's what Jerry would have wanted, but that's how that went down, because I was actually in. Yeah, I got sick.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very, really difficult time of the.
Yeah, I understand. Listen, I want to, Liz. I have to go get pick up my younger daughter. She has a speech therapy right now. Can we do part 2 this Friday or Thursday?
Well, this Friday is my birthday. No, I might be able to do it on Thursday.
Can we hit on Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific? That seems like, as a musician, you functioned extremely well today cognitively at this time.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing. Actually, I'm teaching that time. I could do 11. I could do an hour at 11, like 11:45.
11:45 Pacific, you said?
Yeah, I teach until 11:30. Yes, that'd be 12:45 your time.
12:40. All right. So, is there a way to? Any chance we could do it a little bit earlier, or I mean, before the lesson, or is that just absolutely out of the question?
I actually am doing my spiritual practice thing with the 8:30, 9:30.
Okay. So.
I mean, do you want to email, and I'll try and budge things around. Basically, I'm busy until 11:30, and then I get a break, and I could try and move things around and do it at 10:30 if I can do that.
I would love to. I just want to keep talking to you, so I would. Let's figure out a time on. Is your birthday on Friday?
Yeah.
You know, my younger daughter Asia. We named her after the Steely Dan album. Her birthday is the day before. So I'll be interviewing part 2 with Liz Stiers. Will be going down on my daughter's 6th birthday. Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3733 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming on Power Talk, please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and it's been revelatory for me to connect with this cosmic sister, a woman who is constantly opening her heart to her students because she's had a lot of organic, natural experience growing up at a time in our country when there was an elasticity within music because people were fully connected with each other and saw each other and hung out with each other and got the groove on. And we had a great conversation the other day, and I'm looking forward to set 2. Liz Stiers, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. It's good to talk to you again.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you if you could talk about how you learned to sing 3-part harmony, 4-part harmony, where you slotted your voice in, and how you learned to do that.
Well, I sang harmony with my siblings growing up, which I think is a really valuable thing, and I think it's actually a capacity that more people have if they get exposed to it young. So you're sliding in with whoever picks whatever harmony. You're looking for another harmony when you're young. I think that sort of opens up some pathways. When I was in the music department at junior college, I was singing second alto in one choir and then second soprano in another chorus. So I was developing my range then. I think I was always more of an alto voice, but finding the harmonies is something that happens inside my head. And it's probably something I started doing early, and singing along with the Beatles and Crosby, Stills and Nash and all the amazing harmony groups that came out, that kind of got woven into me pretty early.
How did go ahead.
Well, I can hear all the possible parts, in my head, which is how lots of harmony singers are. Did you
were you inspired by like horn players, horn lines? A lot of time, what's been revelatory for me is that a lot of times you'll hear guitar players saying my favorite musicians were saxophone players, and just the way that the phrasing of it. Were you inspired by melodic instruments along the way, and if so, who? Because, like you said, I mean, like the Byrds, it was just all sort of in that milieu, to borrow your term. It was just 8 Miles High. It was like spinning off of Coltrane. So were you influenced by improvisational musicians?
I think that it's hard to pick out one, and singing. I think the harmony lines of horn sections where they're descending through diminished chords and major seventh chords, and how one note's dropping down and then the rest of the group follows the melody. That I sang in a vocal jazz ensemble for a while, so I love singing those kind of harmonies. But it's all sort of but then again, all of the backup singing and the Motown had a huge impact. Like lots and lots of it came from so many different directions, Jake. I wouldn't know where to point. I wasn't hugely experienced with jazz as a teen. So I would think a lot of my capacity as a harmony singer did not come out of that particular genre.
Even though your dad was a jazzer, I mean, did you get to? How closely did you? I mean, were you born when he was playing jazz, or were you just a baby at that point?
I was a baby when he was playing jazz in San Francisco, and I was not raised around him, so I didn't get the exposure until my teens when I started to go visit him, and then he would sit with me and just put on all these jazz cats and explain what he thought was going on and play, and so I had that that began when I was more like 12, 13. I wasn't around him younger than that very much at all.
Well, who would he put on? And can you give an example of something that really actually you were able to work into your repertoire?
No, I can't. If you were talking about like a week in the summer once, you know, we're not talking about a lot of exposure. I mean, you know, sadly, my father lived in Vermont. I lived in Mill Valley, California. You know, I was not getting a lot of time with him. I mean, he put on Benny Goodman. He put on all these different people that he was trying to, you know, talk about the music that he grew up with, but I didn't get exposed to it enough to speak to it to you. It was an experience, and mainly he was really disappointed in the music of our generation, deeply disappointed. So it was kind of going into I would go into a little bit of a situation where he would say, well, you know, that whole chord progression in the Doors, you know, Light My Fire, like that really had a lot of potential, and a lot of those, you know, rock and roll, you know, musicians have potential, but they don't study and they don't even know what they're doing. They're firing from pure instinct, and then the business gets a hold of them and they never train. So that was his, you know, that's where he was coming from.
Did you hip him to the idea that a lot of the cats from your generation actually were not? They just picked up. They learned. They were self-taught musicians.
Yeah, I think he did, and I think that it partly comes down to he didn't get the kind of training that he wanted till he was already in his 30s. So he had a bias for all of that, and at the same time, all these, you know, we were all listening to. I mean, everybody. Bill Graham was booking all kinds of really different folks together in the same night. So there was a cross-pollination happening that I don't think he could recognize at the time.
Talking to Liz Stiers here on the Jake Feinberg Show. You obviously recognized it. I'm trying to. The reason I brought up the harmony stuff is because I wanted to know how it translate your voice, your singing, how you were able to translate that from a live musical setting, like we talked about before, in maybe like less than ideal sonic settings into the studio. Like, when was the first time you were in the studio, and how did you what were the differences between Liz Stiers' projection on stage versus being equipped in a studio, like when you went to do Run for the Roses, you know, and everything's locked in and you're down in Southern California? Just wanted to talk to you. I wanted to ask you about the differences, if at all.
Well, I think in a studio, when you start recording, and I think I was maybe recorded at Wally Hyder's when I was like maybe 19, and I can't remember, might have been a Rowan Brothers. I can't remember who was doing it. It might have been Huey. I don't know. There were a lot of little tiny projects that came along. But what I was learning is how to really hear each note, the intonation, the attack, the delay, the decay on, you know, how to really shape each note and blend. That comes from really hearing yourself recorded and singing in a really close proximity, harmonies that are closely arranged. You know, for example, the tune, George Harrison's tune, Isn't It a Pity? You know, when you sing that with a couple of singers who really know, or Because by the Beatles, which I sang with Susie Davis recently and Bonnie Hayes like a couple of years ago, you're getting a chance to really fine tune how you blend and how you use your voice, you know, what your instrument really is. So everything teaches you. You know, the studio recording and hearing yourself back is it's the beginning of the big teacher for me. And disappointing in the beginning, I would have to say. At first, you sound great on stage and the energy's great and you can hit the harmonies and you're having a great time, and then you get in the studio and you hear every little thing, and there's this sort of process you have to go through where you have to up your game and learn more about your body and your voice.
Well, could you personalize it and talk about a specific time when that transpired and right in front of you when that happened?
Well, it's funny, Jake. I think early recording, which I didn't do a ton of, didn't really teach it to me. As I started arranging, I probably recorded and arranged 100 songs for singers. And so I get in there, I have, a little Pro Tools set up, and I sit down and I sing the lines, and then I record the next line, the next line. That's actually where I really began to understand, what the significance of each and every note and how my voice and mouth were actually working together and creating sound. That's where it really came in for me. I think it Run for the Roses, I think we sang on a few tunes. Valerie, I don't think Valerie made it. I don't know if did that make it on the album. But, Knock on Heaven's Door, that's a super easy backup part. So there wasn't a big challenge going on for me with the little bit of recording I did with Garcia. It more came later for me.
Well, okay, so can we talk about these seminal times when you were arranging? I mean, let me be clear. Part of one reason I am so happy to be able to connect with you is when you go to I'm not saying I live and die with the All Music Guide, but when I go there, Liz Steyer's, the one album that comes up as a credit is something called Cascade Drive. And and I know, like you just said, you did something at Wally Hyder's, maybe it was Rowan, you don't really remember, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff that you've done that actually hasn't really seen the light of day. So can you talk about a time when you started to arrange and it really, a light bulb went off and it affected your onstage or studio singing as an entertainer and as an artist?
When I first got together with Garcia and we started putting together the material, I could arrange in the moment and sing everybody's part. And I was doing a lot of that. It's like, no, you hit that note and then we'll hit this note and then the high voice hits this note and that's how we're getting. And I think he really appreciated. I mean, I realized later he must have appreciated, because I always felt like I kind of took charge and I just started arranging, but I was without awareness of what that really meant. I can remember going to Tangled Up in Blue and just like coming up with that as an option. And so it came to me, it's just so organic. So I'm a very self-taught, instinctive musician. And I didn't have a lot of reflection. I didn't have people around going, wow, that's interesting that you can do that every time. And I didn't really see it at the time. So I remember doing Huey Lewis's first recording. I think it was released in England, was Exodisco. And, we were in maybe different I don't know which studio we were in. And so we had to sing this continuous, the Exodisco melody. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was pretty kind of much god awful. It was like, let's just do a disco version of a classic song that nobody really likes that well. And it started out with my voice going, Exodisco, like some 14-year-old nymphette. And that's how the song started. That was that kind of singing a long, continuous, I mean, I wasn't really cut out for that. I had not had the kind of, operatic training. So those were, all the kinds of different experiences I was having at the time. And learning every time, learning more every time.
Wow. So, when, you were actually arranging, because Run for the Roses, that was essentially like Knocking on Heaven's Door. Obviously, it was a cover tune, but there were tunes like Valerie and other tunes. So you're telling me you were actually arranging for Garcia's vocal parts as well?
Well, we did that together. It's like, how about we try this? And then, okay, no, well, what if I do that? What if we go Valerie? And we put the harmony on top of that, and that sounds good with Garcia's voice and his range. It was an arising in the moment. But what I've later come to find out more from other musicians is that not everybody heard it quite as quickly in their head as I did. So I got to take a really active role.
Absolutely. So I just want to be clear, because this is so amazing. I actually remember having listening to, I didn't really know what the live Garcia Band sounded like, or I was listening to the studio version. I had the baddest trip of my life, and I was like a freshman at Boston University, and I thought I was headed off to the ward, and I just listened to that tune, that studio version of Valerie, over probably about 300 times that entire night. And in fact, so you had the ability to you knew what hooks, you knew how to create hooks in songs, even though you weren't in the academy. You knew how to hook things because
yeah. Okay, so I don't want to like sound my horn. I didn't know at the time. It took some reflection to realize that I was much more of a player. Like, we did it together. It arose together. The part that I could play was that I could find exactly what the notes had to be, and I always had this. So I was, I don't want to like over credit myself and say, yeah, I know how to.
You're not coming across like that at all. Please, so you're not. You're. This is an egoless situation. This is just something that, like, even now, I listen back to my early interviews with some of the cats, and I was so insecure. Well, whatever. Sometimes I listen back and I'm also inspired, but of course, time is going to enlighten. So, but I'll let you know if you're getting too big for your britches. All right.
I think the bridges came later in a much more different way, which is that I would get invited, like Huey. Okay, you had the Monday Night Live band was performing shows for a year and a half in the late 70s, and we would do a different repertoire. And I was always invited on stage to sing backup because of how fast I can slot in and find the part no one's singing, or how fast I can find a good backup part. It came very naturally to me, but I wasn't crediting myself, nor did I ever really think about, well, why are you always up there? Why is you're always being invited to sing? And that was we did a lot of Motown kind of stuff. It's really fun. So you're asking the question of how does that translate into the studio? I don't know if it does. They're kind of separate experiences. Performing was more what I was doing. I didn't do a ton of studio work until I got older.
Right. I'm just talking about, like, because the studio also, like, I mean, obviously you're on the bandstand, you work out the arrangements, and then you go live in front of 250 people at the Keystone Palo Alto, or you're in front of an outdoor venue. That's one thing. And then in the studio, all of a sudden, everything's kind of, even though in my wildest dreams, I wanted to believe that bands like Blood, Sweat, and Tears were, when I listened to some of their stuff post David Clayton Thomas, and I listened to some of their stuff, I want to believe that they were all hitting at the same time, and they weren't. They would actually do it at the same time about 2 or 3 times. So they were really, when they would hit, they were really warm. But they would do the rhythm sections, and they would do the horn parts, and then they would do the vocals, and that sort of is the fantasy that I have, and it's not there. So in the studio, though, you did do the separation. There was a lot of separation, and when it was time to do vocals, you would do vocals, right? I mean, it was very different.
It's very different in the studio. I mean, it's always very different, and even at Front Street with the Run for the Roses album, me and myself and Julie Stafford, we would record our parts together. We would record together and do the 3 parts. I think it was Bob Matthews. I don't know that they had to do a ton of engineering on our parts. So there might have been some more live takes. Really things have gotten more. People are doing much more editing now. Once the digital world came out, you could splice, you could move everything. It's a different world, and it wasn't that way back then. That was still analog. We did, the live performances had some feeling to them and done at the same time. It wasn't all separated out quite that much.
I was going to say, had you been to Front Street before that experience, before that session?
Well, we had done some rehearsals for the first gigs. I think my first gig was at the Warfield, maybe. So we were rehearsing at Front Street for that. So yeah. Well,
no, I was just wondering because when I interviewed, I don't have the audio queued up, but when I interviewed Melvin, he when he first walked into Front Street, he freaked out because, he was totally a man of the church and a deeply faithful man. And then here they are, there's all these skeletons and, just sort of wild. I mean, I know this wouldn't faze you, but, and then Jerry, the band came in and they were like, all right, let's play some Motown tunes. And they played a couple tunes and that was it. But were you, prior to that, had you already been working with Kingfish?
No, that was much later. No, I mostly all I had been doing was my band and Huey, and then little side projects with various local artists. So no, and I hadn't been into the Front Street Studios before I was in the band. I mean, I knew where they were because it was right in, but no. I didn't find them to be shocking at all.
I know you did. No, I know you did not. I know this was par for the course.
Yeah. No, he was just, he was a very bright being, and it was absolutely a blast to be able to stand. I was pretty much always standing in front of the B3, so when he flipped the Leslie on, I got the full, benefit.
Just the full vibrational effect of that. That's just unbelievable. God. I mean, that is my
beautiful.
So, this is important. A lot of my show deals in the metaphysical, and I've talked to a lot of cats about this, and I wanted you to talk about it because of the fact that we talked in the first interview about the human connectivity and the non-dual reality of that, and I wanted you to talk about an experience that you had on the bandstand when you left your physical body.
Oh, well, that was to be, I'm describing it. There were just times when the field between every time you play a song with the exact same people, even if you're in the same room, all the conditions are the same. It's never the same, right? It's always arising in the moment. The nuance of what's coming through each human musically at that moment can't be repeated. So I can tell you that there were times where, just being able to be on stage and sing Dear Prudence, and we're singing Look Around, Round, 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 that there were, it was like it was a melding energy, so that, you're no longer the individual singing your part. You're just part of this expression that's coming out of all the people that are in the room, audience included. Audiences affect the field of musicians hugely. So I had those experiences in various points with the Garcia Band, and I had them in other places as well.
Well, I was going to say, I'd like I want you to think about, I'll give you an example. Billy Cobham. I've done 5 interviews. Billy never did any drugs in his life, and yet when he was with Mahavishnu, I'm not sure. Maybe you probably saw that band, or maybe not. But it's a phenomenal group and legendary human beings as well. And so, but Billy, what's that?
They were actually just here. I missed them, unfortunately, but go ahead.
You're talking about Johnny McLaughlin was here, right? Not his band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they called it the Mahavishnu. They booked it as Mahavishnu. A friend of mine went a couple of months ago.
Yeah, but that's the name that Sri Chimnoy gave him. So that's right. Yeah. So so I've done multiple interviews with both those cats, but the point is that with Billy, this is not based on drugs. This was the end of a tour.
Yeah.
All right, and they were at the Olympia. They were in France somewhere, and it was the second set, and they just played to the heavens for 2 or 3 weeks. They were exhausted, physically exhausted. And Billy told me a story. I'll send you the interview. He said that at a certain point he looked over. He's playing and he's so tired. He's almost ready to sleep on the bandstand. And he looks over. He could see himself. He was on the side of the stage and he could see himself playing.
Oh.
So it had to do with fatigue. Okay. It was and that's, I just, there's only 2 letters that separate magic and music. So I'd really love you to talk about an early experience when you really transcended and left your physical body.
Well, I want to just really like pop one out for you, but it's not coming up in my mind in the way that that description is beautiful. And I guess I think Billy Cobham was playing with Bobby and the Midnights when we toured.
Well, don't even get me started on that, because I mean, I would have been.
No.
It was just that was 10 years later. We're talking like 72. But I mean, does fatigue? Forget the drugs. Does fatigue, when you are really exhausted? That's when.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that aspect of being either? And that's the other part of it, is that people say, like we talked last time. When you go ahead.
What happens is that I did not have a leaving my body, seeing my body. In fact, that particular experience has never happened to me. It has more to do with a transcendent disconnecting from all the breathing, anticipating, knowing the arrangement, thinking about what you're going to do. All of that goes away, and then you are just a voice that's blending with what's happening in the room. And it's, there's a transcendentness, but the thing only thing I can imagine to add to that is that there's an exhaustion and intensity to being on the road, and being on the road with two people or a few people or two bands, and you're all traveling, that, it can get really difficult. And it can be exhausting, and conditions are less than perfect always, as we know. So what I would say is that I could have nights, and there was a night in New York on the first tour at the Apollo Theater, and I remember thinking, I can't possibly do this show. I am so exhausted, I'm so upset, and there were many personal things happening, and so what happens is there's a vortex that's like you go out, and all of a sudden the energy is there, everything arises, and sometimes when you're in the worst shape, you do the best performances. You reach down deep and you find something that is gold. But you don't look for it quite so carefully when you're not as exhausted as you are. So it's kind of interesting. That's what I could say to that.
Well, I think you are 100%. First of all, you weren't. What gig was at the Apollo? And the Jerry never played the Apollo.
Okay, so what's the name of the theater? I'll have to look it up.
What was it? 81? I don't know. I'll look it up for you. You guys were playing.
The 81. Yeah, the 81 tour.
Yeah, okay. I'll look that up for you. That's the other thing. Some people would say they already have. Chris Parker from Stuff. I mean, he came back from New Orleans and he had full-fledged pneumonia. He was in the band called Stuff with Richard T. and Eric Gale and he came back from New Orleans, and the doctor's like, you need to go to the hospital. Like, you're really sick. Yeah. And, and they had a gig at McKell's on the Upper West Side, and
Did you? The Palladium. That's what it was.
The Palladium. We are going to vet the entire. We're vetting Liz Steyer's entire career. By the way, this is just I am so honored to be doing this. But he said that he was so ill that. But he said, "No, I'm not going. I have a gig tonight." Okay, and he was playing double drums with Steve Gadd, and he said that he was so ill that all he could think about was getting in. All he wanted to do was crawl into bed. He got on the bandstand, and when he finished the show, everybody was saying, "Dude, I've never seen you play. You were playing your butt off. I mean, you were playing crazy." And he's like, "I just want to go to bed." But it's like you at that point, it's just instinct at that point,
Yeah, but that's the difficulty of being an artist. You have to develop your skills, and then you have to let them go for the magic to come through you. And that is a really interesting thing. We could talk for an hour about that, because the exhaustion breaks down these habits that get set up. It's like the internal superego that says, well, you have to play it this way, and we do it that way, and we've worked really hard, so this is what we're going to do. Well, you have to be able to transcend that to make really something that's never been done before come through you. And sometimes it's only exhaustion that really introduces you to the fact that you have a capacity you haven't yet gotten to know, if that makes sense. I got sick of it. So I got sick, but I didn't have that. We played a show in Portland, it was a lot of driving the bus. We were on that tour, the 82 tour, and we had been on the bus all night, driving from Portland, Maine to Richmond, Virginia. So that's a long drive. And you know, after a show, you don't go to sleep anyway, and so on and so forth. But I didn't know that I was getting sick until I was in the hotel room, and then I really I couldn't even get to the phone when I realized that I was incapacitated. I was like, what I had was pneumonia. I had my lungs had a spot. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of things. I had some kind of, you know, systemic infection. So I eventually, somebody came to me and found me and got me to the hospital, but I never got to go on stage. And that was my most depleted state, but I didn't make it on stage that day.
Oh,
So
I have that Cumberland County show. You sound amazing, but you were really already sick at that point.
I was getting sick, yeah, and you know, you don't know sometimes how much is this road exhaustion. It's really hard to tell, and you know, and everybody's sort of doing what they can to keep their energy going. So you can miss the fact that you're really not okay, which is what happened on that trip.
You know, I just I wanted to ask you about this idea of your time. I find it interesting. You spent time in Zurich. Can you talk about what you remember? Not even remember, but what was so interesting, just that European vibe in general, and that appreciation of and what you were really craving at that time in your life, and what you got out of that experience.
Yes. See, my parents were seekers, my mom and my stepdad. I mean, my dad too was in his own way. He was certainly seeking creativity, and but in Zurich, they were being introduced to Jung, to a whole field that was alive with people who had been studying around Jung at the Jung Institute in Zurich, and kind of connecting to the truth of the collective unconscious, and really understanding that things, if you wake up, you'll notice that the world's talking to you all the time. There's all sorts of unlikely things that are occurring in time and space. So they were very interested in their dreams. They were writing their dreams down. They were painting their dreams. This is my mother and my stepfather. And I just joined them. I went to lectures at the Jung Institute. I had a woman who was from Denmark who was studying to be an analyst at the Jung Institute. She was my analyst, and so I still have all the dreams and all my paintings from that year in 1971, 72. It had a profound, that's kind of when, you know, we mentioned Lao Tzu last time, you know, these dialogues that I began then with my mother and my stepfather that went on for a lifetime about the nature of reality, and the fact that we're not separated, you know, that there's just some kind of a, you know, truth and something unfolding that it's like magic. But, you know, there was a whole system of understanding that Jung, you know, his books really expressed that came into my being at that time. I was a teenager, and I was playing a ton of music, but I was having this really unusual experience with my parents and with that community of analysts that were there at the time. And many of them I still know. They moved back to the States, and they ended up being training analysts.
Can you talk about a dream that you painted?
Sure. Well, I mean, just a small example was a dream I had about somebody jumping off a bridge. They weren't throwing it; they were jumping off a bridge. It wasn't me, but I was watching someone jump off the bridge. So then I had gone into, and I painted a picture of it. It wasn't particularly, I wasn't an artist. I would love to have been more gifted, really gifted as a visual
You're a
artist.
pretty good artist. You're just not a painter.
I'm not a painter. I'd love to be able to paint, though. But what I was doing was working with my analysts about the motif of a bridge, and, you know, what does that mean, and what is it? Where in my life, where inside of me am I now transiting over a body of water and going from one landmass to another? You know, what was that speaking to? What is that dream speaking to? And so I came back from my appointment with my analyst, and I went to the mailbox, and my boyfriend in the States would write me like 2 or 3 times a week. And there was a letter from him, and inside was a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was so, like the way that things could show up, unlikely events could suddenly connect. I had tons of those kinds of experiences at that time, and it changed me forever. I was no longer a separate being. I was no longer me in the world, interacting with objects and people. I was connected.
I love this. This is exactly where I'm at in my life at 39. I mean, did you realize at that point that there are no coincidences in life?
Yes. It's synchronicity, and you read Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. You get introduced to it, and once you're waking up to it, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I've had phenomenal synchronicities in my life. That's just a simple one.
So have you, like, how deeply did you get involved with the Sufi, with Sufism? Especially, I mean, I know your parents were big readers of Gurdjieff, but I mean, the Sufis, mystics, and you strike me as somebody who tapped into that really early in you were just a teenager. So can you talk about how Sufism has played a role with your spirit and also your constitution as a just putting in time on planet Earth?
Yeah, I was not. I mean, I spent a lifetime, before the Sufism, being introduced to the Tao and the I Ching. So I spent a lifetime in that kind of dialogue with writing down my dreams and working with the motifs that come up in my dreams and in my life, and seeking. I would, my family would all throw the I Ching on New Year's Eve. Everybody would throw a hexagram for the next year.
Oh, that's so great. Where am I? I want to be in that family. That's awesome. My God.
Yes. So there was that aspect. But then I went, for a long time I was involved in 12-step programs. I was, I was sort of understanding God from different perspectives. And when I came into the Diamond Approach work, Hamid Ali, a lot of the Sufi teachings are folded into Diamond Heart. So he teaches the Latayef, the Latifa, some people, the dimensions of consciousness are kind of straight out of Sufism, but I never really became versed in any way in Sufism. I kind of went, straight into the Diamond Approach work, which is where I've been the last 10 or so years.
Can you expand on that approach? And when you say 12-step program, that sounds like recovery, but I didn't realize that was a spiritual thing. Yeah. Is that? Well,
the thing about 12-step recovery, for a very long time, I didn't want to alter my consciousness. I really wanted to get to know and understand the being that I was and the nature of reality. That sounds kind of fast, but and I think that's actually true.
The nature of your reality.
The nature of my reality, but there's a nature. There's some understanding to be had about true nature and what we are doing here on Earth as humans, and what are the aspects of consciousness that we all share, and where is that energy? Where does love come from? Where does where does willpower come from? Where does strength come from?
Right.
That's where I ended up. But I didn't want to be putting anything in my body during for many. I just don't. That's not what my life is about anymore. It's taking substances in. But in the beginning, I think opening my mind to having a spiritual practice and meditation was really something that came through 12 steps. That they, the recommendation that you meditate. Do you have a meditation practice, Jake?
I play drums. I mean, it's not a traditional sedentary. But yeah. I just understand. Yeah. But I want to be clear with you. One reason I know we've connected is because I need help finding, getting not just. accessing my true nature when I'm doing stuff that I love, but being my true nature all the time, and so I lack that I lack that patience.
Well, you're at a perfect point to time to do that. I think, Jung always really said it's, you have to go out and be a warrior in the world and do a lot before you're ready for the time in your life where you start to have the capacity to wake up spiritually and slow down and be in presence. You have to stopping doing. It's very hard to stop doing. We are a doing driven society. And so I would say in 12 steps, there's a recommendation around, prayer and meditation. And, just the point of being able to have a meditation practice and begin to have a contemplative practice where read some of the spiritual teachers, see what the teachings are. There's been all these different transmissions coming, whether it's Sufi or it's Thich Nhat Hanh or whoever. There's so many incredible people teaching on earth right now. But availing myself to that, I got a lot of support to do that through the 12-step program because I got the idea that it was important. It was important that I have some meditation every day. So that's where I started studying. And then there's a teacher named Pema Chodron who I encountered. She was ordained by Shoyam Trungpa, who's a Tibetan.
He was at Naropa. He was at Naropa, right?
He was at Naropa, and she was there too. So I started studying particular teachers more deeply. I did not do that with Sufism, but I did do it with Buddhism, and it led me slowly to a teacher who works, we have a practice, but we also do something called inquiry, which is a very, very powerful way of learning how to ask the questions of each other over and over in repetition maybe, or get a teaching where we can really drill in and understand, what it is that we're carrying, what our human souls have been impacted by, and what we need to digest in order to really live our true nature. It's like you want to live your true nature, but there's all these obstacles in the way, called your ego. And so this work is about kind of lasering into that and trying to really metabolize that out so that you have the freedom to have, what humans can have in terms of consciousness. It's pretty amazing.
Well, hearing you talk about it too you make it pretty. You're pretty eloquent when you talk about it. I just, in some ways, I wanted to ask you about, from your point of view, how did the vibe musically and for you personally change when the drug of choice really went from LSD and cocaine really came into being? It was like very problematic for people. It was, it destroyed a lot of people, and it also made people. I'm just going to tell you this right now, and I want you can correct the record if you want, but there is. Jimmy Warren, I guess, was the keyboard player and in the band for a while with Jerry. And I'll be honest. I listen to his playing sometimes, and he sounds out of key. He sounds like he's not in tune. And the word on the street was that he was in the band primarily because he got he had a great connection to cocaine, and that was essentially, but that was the drug of choice. And Jerry, I don't need to tell you. At that point, you kind of, he was at the beginning stages of basically he should have been dead 3 years later. There's no way that he should have even lived. Once you left the band, he was deteriorating. Obviously, went into the coma. But for you. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like going from, psychedelics, to harder drugs, and then how did you shake that? Because you're still here today, and you're you like some people. Some people have blow their holes in their brain because of that stuff, but not you.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot in that. First of all, I would say that Jimmy Jacobs was my friend and my boyfriend. And I've obviously, I know the record on the GD site, and I'll send you I think there's probably about 20 or 25 cuts on this one collection. I would like to set the record straight, having watched Jimmy play before he ever met Jerry Garcia. I see him on stage with Chuck Berry and Chapito from the Santana Band, and I know him to be a really good player.
Oh, that's all. I didn't know he played with Chapito. He played with Chapito.
He was in Chapito's
Yeah.
band.
See, I mean, that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is that. Let me just be clear.
Yeah.
Because again, I wasn't around for it.
It's okay. It's okay. No, Jake, I'm happy to set the record because you didn't make the record. It's okay.
Thank you. It's just sometimes it's like those early shows. I mean, it's like you guys would play like 17-minute, tunes. Like it just, it was just. But again, it was like, okay, so I mean, I know that like it was in the cocaine at that time. You go back to. Again, referencing Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I mean, RCA. This is in the studio. RCA would just set up couches for 2 weeks in the studios, huge bowls of the purest cocaine, and it was just like it was just part of the deal. I mean, to me, it was like it just seemed like excess, And Jimmy.
No, I think that. Yeah. Go ahead, Jimmy. What?
And I know Jimmy.
Jimmy was part of that. He was part of it. He was not. Most every musician at that time in the late 70s and going into the 80s, they were all buying. They were getting it from all kinds of sources. They were giving it to each other. The transition for me, I didn't take a lot of psychedelics. I took some, and I was really afraid of it. I was young enough to have seen people really lose it, so I was cautious. And then cocaine came in later, so I hadn't really had a heavy using adolescence by any stretch. I was in Zurich. I was, studying different things. But cocaine was just a soulless drug. I mean, I can't think. It's like if you wanted to just invent something that would have all the bad qualities and none of the good ones. Expensive. It doesn't last long. You feel like killing yourself. I mean, really, who came up with that drug?
I don't. And it's also like incredibly isolating. Like, I mean, Melvin would say. Yeah. I mean, Melvin was like. He was talking to me like, they'd go into Club Front and they'd do like 2 tunes, and then he'd look around and like everybody had disappeared in their own little rooms. And he's like, where did everybody go? And it's like so isolating. And it's kind of, it just, what it comes across as, truthfully, it seemed very sinister. And actually what's interesting is that, people blame Rock Scully for feeding Jerry, his drug habits, which was a combination of, obviously heroin and cocaine and whatever else, but Dan Healy was like, dude, Jerry wasn't a baby being spoon fed. He knew exactly what he was. It just right. It came across as as much as I am sort of in my fantasy, I'm like, this is such a cool hip group of people. I also know that you guys were really burning at both ends. It was a kind of destructive time.
Well, I mean, I think for me I was in my 20s and about to, so I left. I mean, literally my life really changed after all that. So it was kind of burning. It was burning. It was, but I want to say one thing is that, well, first of all, for Jimmy Warren is Jimmy Jacobs, and he was a true to the form, artist and keyboard player, regardless of whether he played bad shows or good shows and all of it. I certainly have records of his good shows and know him to be, like I said, I watched him do 4 nights with Chuck Berry, and Chuck Berry just lit up around him. He had his skills, but he was also, like many of these guys who are artists in the world, They've got the artist temperament. They have the whole creativity that if you're an artist, you're out here kind of channeling the darkness into the light. You're talking about
absolutely. It's the nexus of genius and addiction. Stan Getz is a classic example. So go ahead.
Tons. So tons of people trying to deal with that temperament, Garcia included. Poor Garcia, man, he had to keep 2,000 people employed when he had a soul and spirit that needed all kinds of time off and time. He was using the chemistry he needed to keep churning that band and that world out. If everybody was, he was carrying the world on his shoulders. But so were all the little side musicians who weren't famous and weren't, making everybody a ton of money. They were also living with being artists in the world, and musicians are not taken care of in the world, are they? If you're not big and famous, you're just, doing it for love. So, Jimmy Moore and Jimmy Jacobs is still out there playing music for love, and so am I. And yeah, that was a dark period, and I think tons of people were discovering that they had addiction as an issue, and cocaine or smoking heroin or whatever they were doing was part of what they were using to keep trying to play music, and the two intersected, and it wasn't easy. But I just don't think it's accurate to paint that as somebody's a bad guy. But everybody was participating in that and trying to find their way. Everybody I know that was in the music business at that time was grappling with cocaine or alcohol or smoking heroin or whatever they were doing, and also trying to continue to develop and create music in the world. And that's how it was.
Did you, was this stuff that was done, did you find yourself out of your mind on stage, or was it something that was done after the shows? Or, you guys, your voice is so...
I was never out of... Go ahead. My voice was what, Steve?
No, I love your voice, and so I was like, with the Dead, with those guys were the epitome of acid test, on the who knows what they were doing during the show. But I always wonder, I'm like, if they always kept it together. Obviously the acid tests were 15 years before you joined the band, and they weren't doing it at that point. But I actually really, I just wonder about the. Plus, also, it was so different at that time. You'd play 3 sets at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, and you wouldn't get out of the gig till 3 a.m. And it's this is insane. You go back. I was like, people. You must have seen a lot of your friends roadkill on the side of the road. You lost a lot of friends, I bet.
Well, I was sort of an early exit. Because if I was out of that whole scene before I was 30,
right? Because you would have been in a body bag. You would have been dead.
I think I would have. When I was in that tour, I was like, I didn't have the constitution that those guys had, and but I had the soul. I had the kind of heart and soul that was going to be prone for using what I needed to go up and come down while traveling through those shows. So I had to step out of it. What the thing is life. I don't know. What was your original? You just made a question that I.
Well, no, it was just irrelevant. It was just the idea. The idea was that it's what's confounding is okay, so you finish the show and doing a bunch of blow is not going to help you go to sleep. So you weren't doing it. When was that? When were you actually in doing partying? Was it just on the bus rides, on those long rides, or when would you actually be partying?
I think for the people that were who were in bands at that time who drank, alcohol really makes people much more out of control, tending to black out. Jim Morrison on stage there's some really, I think that the people who were smoking heroin were a little more controlled, and getting to the end of the night and trying to I was never, I don't really want to go into telling stories, but it's more it's just, you're trying to get to sleep and get enough rest so that you can get up and do it again the next day. that's the nature of it. So no, I wasn't up doing cocaine all night. Obviously.
And by the way, I'm really sorry that I even played that Capitol Theater show, knowing that you were sick and unable to attend that show. I mean, I feel so ashamed by that.
Okay.
You know,
No,
I mean,
no.
you know, I mean, you went to you said Different Fur. That was Dr. Patrick Gleason's studio. He's a dear friend of the program. So you recorded in Different Fur?
A long time on one of the earlier recording. There's a lot of time. I can't put together all the different moments where somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to do a session in this studio or that studio." So I whether it's the record plant or wherever I was, and I only did a little bit of that. But I want to go back to this thing you're focusing on, because I think it's really important. There is a lot, like when Tom Petty, when the report came back that he had OD'd.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to tell you that the focus and the pernicious judgmentalness that goes down when people talk about whether it's Garcia and the heroine or any other of the musicians, whether Prince, it really makes me sad. It's like you are not seeing the big picture. You are not honoring these people who have these really difficult, beautiful jobs that they're trying to do in the world. And addiction is really easy to slip into, and then you get blamed, and then we blame them for that, and think somehow that's a lesser transmission. That's just, that's the reality of what most musicians are trying to deal with, because it's not that easy to be doing that work as an artist in the world. And it bothers me that people kind of want to zero in and then watching musicians backbite each other about it. That just really breaks my heart. It's like, come on. We're on a team here of creative people.
Well, that's the point, is that it went from this. I mean, I was transcribing one of my interviews with Stanley Clark, and he's just like, I know cats that are on the road and they hate each other. They can't stand each other, but they do it because of the money. And I'm like, and that's just not what music is about. And again, it's this nexus. It's this nexus of genius and addiction. And part of it is also masking of anxiety and or depression. In the case of Petty,
Sure.
It wasn't any different really than Garcia, in the sense that Jerry was trying to keep people. He was essentially, like Peter Rowan told me, the Grateful Dead were like this phantom ship. And this is going back to the 70s, when he was in like Golden in the Way, where he was doing and loving what he loved to do. But then the band would come back, and everybody else attached to the band, including the roadies and all the people, and say, we need our drugs, we need this, we need to go on tour. And so, Jerry was pulled, not that he didn't like the Grateful Dead, but it really wasn't his love. His first love was the Jerry Garcia Band. And and so it's focusing on the sort of the underbelly and the dark side of addiction, and this sort of, as opposed to just the fallibility of us as human beings, that because we're just very weak in so many ways. We always are weak, and we're trying to just become stronger all the time. Jerry never did, but it never leaves. Tom Petty was still dealing with that madness till the day he died, and you wonder just how many other peeps are in that exact same boat. And I give you full credit. So let's just talk, when you left the Garcia tour, which it seems to me, after you got sick on the road, that was your last gig, right? You never came back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so did you...
I came... Go ahead.
No, at that point, did you find yourself going directly into rehab, and at that point you turned a corner?
No, I didn't. No, I never went to rehab. I never went to any kind of program. I had a moment of clarity, where I was, I was on the road, and I was doing what I love, but I could not do it in that form anymore. And I came back, and I actually ended up going up into the mountains to sit with this guy named Arnie Mendel, who had worked directly with Marie-Louise von Franz in Zurich. And, I was in an addiction, and and he said, this is a lethal addiction. and you need to stop. And so I just did. I went and lived in Colorado and just changed my life. But I didn't. And I think in a certain way, I'm a little more of a codependent than an actual true addict. I mean, I didn't have a lot of trouble doing that, whereas most people do, and so I didn't, I could let decades go by and not pick up drugs or alcohol. It was not that, for me, it was more about waking up to my path as an awakening, spiritual being on the earth, and my creativity, and finding a way to channel it in a different way than that lifestyle. I couldn't do it with those people in that lifestyle.
Where did you how did you channel do you remember the next gig on the bandstand you had? Was it pretty quick after that, or I mean, like how quick? Because I mean, that's you are always somebody who just needs to get stuff out of your system in order to become more in tune with yourself. So I mean, I have to believe that you were creating pretty soon after once you recovered from the pneumonia.
Well, once I recovered from pneumonia and came off of the impact of having used a lot, which I did on the road all those times, but I had to start over, the whole expansion of being in the Garcia Band and being in that world. I didn't have a job, I didn't have a skill, I didn't have a lot of things. So, my next gig wasn't for a couple years, other than playing and working on songs on my own at home. So I went through a whole my life had a rehabbing, where I ended up with a day job, and then I went back to school and got a degree and learned a bunch of things and music at that time. Then I came back and I went on a tour I did a tour with the Kingfish and Bobby in 87. And that was the next time, from 82 to 87, I did some small coffee shop type gigs, but very little performing. So I was not, right back on the bandstand like you're asking.
Do you have tapes of those coffee house gigs?
I don't. There were few and far between. I was really focusing on trying to get an education and do something where I would have the life some things I wanted, like my son, So
you birthed a child after that. That's when your son came.
My son didn't come till I was already 40. Yeah.
Wow. And can you talk about the experience of did you have a home birth? I always am fascinated with the spiritual quality.
Yeah, no, I am like the epitome of this. At that time, I was coordinating, I was a doula and coordinating a labor coaching program for Spanish speakers in my county. And really, I was coordinating perinatal, I was the coordinator of perinatal services for the county of Marin.
Wow.
And I was so excited about giving birth, and I was pregnant, and I was the greatest thing, and then my son went breech. And I could not have a vaginal birth. I had to have a C-section, which was it was very ironic at the time. So I can't tell you the great birth story, but boy, do I have it in my head, because I know exactly what I thought was going to happen, and that's not what happened.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really fast. So you had a cesarean, but then I guess the other thing was that I'm curious about is because you were marinating so much in this in all this philosophy and Eastern spirituality in the 70s, and then you came back after when you had to reevaluate and like you said, you didn't really go back on tour for 5 years. What were you trying to regain some of the I don't know what's used wisdom, but what did you have to grow on, because you were already steeped in the knowledge part of it? Was it actually application?
Yeah. Well, this is such a I'm hoping you're going to edit some of this out because it's just esoteric, but in the sense that I had been exposed to Jung and the ideas about the shadow, and the fact that if you really want to be creative in the world, you have to have access to the shadow, and you have to know what it is. And to some extent, what I experienced in my 20s was, stepping out into the world and into some shadowy places and getting to know what that was about.
Interesting. Very interesting. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being extremely esoteric on the Jake Feinberg Show. So please just be free.
I'm blaming you, Jake. You keep asking me.
Well, all you got to listen. All you got to do is go listen to, you listen to any.
I haven't listened to enough, clearly.
No, you haven't, because this is not like a unique thing. I'm asking McLaughlin the same questions, and I'm getting different, but so just go fly away.
Yeah. So the value for me of going through, what was a shadowy time in some ways with Garcia, but in the other ways, there were absolutely beautiful, beautiful experiences. And he's a beautiful man. I can't tell you how blessed. I know everybody would say this, but I am a small character in that play, and to have been able to know him and travel and listen to him and get to know him the way I did was a huge blessing. So it wasn't all dark, but I had to. The way I grew up, and I've described some of it, the early, being sort of burst at a really young age into an adult world and traveling through it, I had to slow down. So I spent really my 30s kind of backfilling some basic skills that I had, not skills, but, I had gone to college and graduated and all this from high school and stuff, but I had a lot of work to do. So it was integration time. And that's, so I was studying, my spiritual path has always been pretty active, and my I write and I draw and I write down my dreams. All that's always been going on in the background. But music, I was just, really just writing songs, and I didn't really come back fully to it until I was in my 40s. I did not come back fully to it until then. I sang in some choirs and did this, and I was in a gospel choir for 4 years, but I didn't really come back to the commitment to the life of the musician to really work at it the way I did in the last 20 years.
Well, I'm just absolutely exhausted spiritually from this. You have just floored me in this conversation. So can we do part 3? I'm not really. I'm gonna have this thing on streaming on the radio. It's very soon, but I feel we have more to do.
Okay, so am I to understand that you'll edit this a little bit and put it on this weekend, or are you gonna hold off?
Well, it's your call. I feel like I'd like to do part 3 with you, but I'd be glad. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to send you.
No, I'd rather wait, because we're just traveling. In a way, talking to you, Jake, is like you're delving into really big, deep areas of my being, and I'd like to feel like there's some completion, and because I'm not sure who your listeners are or what I haven't really had the time, like I said, to understand your audience and your way.
Well,
but I don't want to.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, there's a couple things, and I completely understand it. I know you don't have a personal Facebook page, but a lot of what I do is I connect human beings through the story. Yeah, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the thing is, we should become friends on Facebook so you can see. I take the transcriptions of a lot of stories, some of the heaviest stories. I've done thousands. It should be a book by now. But I am putting out these stories on new media, and when for instance, we just lost Ndugu Chancellor. I don't know if you knew. We also lost John Perry Barlow yesterday, the great lyricist.
I know.
So I did 2 interviews with John, and everything from the April experiment with Timothy Leary to his experiences with Neil Cassidy. These are all interviews, things that I extracted on the radio from him. I transcribed those stories. I put up multimedia posts, and these things fly all over the world. Nobody's doing anything close to what I'm doing. So, my listenership, that's one thing. But you know what? It's a dual medium thing. It's actually tri-medium, because what I would like to propose to you is that I will come to visit you very soon, so we can meet in person and do an interview in person, and then I think we will have a lot of really wonderful material and some completion that you desire.
Yes, that sounds really good, and I have great respect for what I see you trying to do, and that there are so many stories that need to be told before people are leaving the planet. So I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Well, I encourage you to stream. I just want you to know you're not like, some outlier. This is what I've been doing for 6 years, and I've been wanting to find. I've been looking for you for a long time. So it's wonderful.
I will befriend you. I'm right now trying to find you on Facebook. I don't know why it doesn't seem so easy, but Liz Stires. I have Liz Stires, and I think I have Liz Stires Music. I have 2 Facebook.
Well, no,
pages.
yeah, we were friends for a hot minute. We were friends for a while, but then we weren't. It's Jake.
Oh.
It's Jake D. It's Jake D. Feinberg. It's Jake D. Feinberg.
Okay, so now I know what happened. I didn't know who you were.
Of course.
I thought, so I was like, who is this Jake?
I'm like, all I wanted to do was like have you on my program, and then people are like, this guy's a freak. I'm out of here, But really, the 2 things you should do.
I'm a pretty. I will do that.
And I'll send you I'll Dropbox this to you, and then you need to tell me based on we'll set up a time to maybe next week. Is that a good thing? Can we do part 3 next week?
Yeah, we can do that. I'm just a little bit sensitive. I'm a little private, a little sensitive, and we're talking about such deep stuff, and it's a long way from the what did you do musically. So I want to just I'm asking for some sensitivity and inclusion, that I know what you're going to do or what.
Well, the other thing is this. Let me tell you something. The anything that you're not comfortable with, I can edit out. But at the same time, stuff that a lot of times I do transcribe. Like Steve Gadd was another interview I'll send you, where he openly acknowledges almost losing everything to drugs, and overcoming it. So there's deeply personal stuff, and it's very inspiring for a lot of people. But as we evolve in our collaboration, if there's certain things that you don't want me to transcribe, or I just want to work with you. I'm very.
We can talk off the record, is what you're saying, because my sensitivity when you call is that this is somehow going live out to the world. So so we'll talk more.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, please. All I want to do is work. I just work with you. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you soon, Liz.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Another edition of the Jake Feinberg Show with Liz Stires. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Peace.